saw something written the other day. It says, sit with warriors, a conversation's different. That's very true.
For more than 40 years, Randy Strong has dedicated his life to protecting and serving his communities.
I made a huge difference in certain people's lives for the better. I took a bad situation, did the best I could with it under really difficult circumstances.
The outgoing, retiring Nodaway County Sheriff had an unusual path to law enforcement, going to Northwest Missouri State originally with a passion for art, but changing that course after working with EMS first responders.
I was one of Missouri's first licensed paramedics. My license number was M394.
The evolution continuing as Strong knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be an investigator. And it's not always easy to get suspects and witnesses to talk to you, but it's a talent Strong developed over time.
It's just making a rapport with that individual. Quite frankly, most people, it's hard for them to lie. They don't feel good about it. Now, you can get hardened people that, depending on their personality type, you're going to have to work at it.
The talent paying off, especially because Strong finding himself in the middle of some of the most infamous murders and crimes in Northwest Missouri.
First homicide that came under my watch, where I was in charge of it, was Karen Hawkins. I actually sat down with the suspect. I figured out who the suspect was pretty quickly and got a confession from him.
Strong got his start with the Kenrex McElroy homicide in Skidmore more than 40 years ago.
Just not by any design or means. I just happened to be with Chief Larry Jackson and John Hood, who was a department detective. And when Sheriff Danny Estes put out a radio request for us to come over, he needed help. And so rather than dumping me on the streets of Maryville, I found myself in the middle of this murder over there. It's the first homicide I ever had gone to. I knew it was going to be big because I knew McElroy's history.
Another one of the high-profile cases Strong had to work, one of his longest investigations. The disappearance and murder of Christine Elkins.
I investigated that for 7 years of my life.
Law enforcement didn't find Elkins, who was a federal informant in a drug trafficking investigation in 1990, until 1997, when they pulled her car from the river and found her bones in the trunk.
We sat in the basements of federal penitentiaries throughout the country listening to phone calls. It was really, really tough, and as it drug on, so you had what we were dealing with and then what trying to keep the family up to date and feeling their emotions and seeing how they struggled with it.
And throughout the last several years, Strong has led the continued search for Branson Perry, who disappeared from Skidmore, Missouri back in April 2001.
We continue to get information in on that without giving anything away. We're not done by that by any means. There's been some really good investigators work on that case. It's made difficult by the culture of the people that were involved and what they're into. It's not been an easy one to overcome.
Another crime Strong was right in the midst of, the horrific murder of Bobby Joe Stinnett in December 2004 over in Skidmore as well.
I went to the National Homicide Seminar several years prior to that, and there was a topic on that. I actually saw a couple of cases that were just very similar. The killers were women.
A woman by the name of Lisa Montgomery killed Stinnett and took her then unborn child as her own.
When Sheriff Espy called me with the horrific news, I knew that they were going on a bad call, and he called me. He said, "Can you go down to the emergency room at the hospital, and we have our victim down there?" And he said, "Can you document that and collect evidence off of her?" And I walked in there and saw the gravity of what had happened. I saw the violence in that.
Montgomery, using an alias, went to Stinnett's house because the two were part of an online dog breeding chat room.
These emails that Darlene Fisher for Kids, was her email tag was to see her about the time of the murder. And so she claimed to be from Atchison County over in the Tarkio area. No one had ever heard of this Darlene Fisher. So that was a big, huge red flag, and that kind of fit what I was thinking. We're looking for a woman.
The murder sent shockwaves, law enforcement flooding Skidmore, and Strong, with Don Fritz and many others, worked the case as fast as they could, trying to find Montgomery and Stinnett's baby. Working through the night and coming back the next morning, still looking for leads, Strong had a gut feeling about one lead, and it led him and Fritz about 3 hours away to Kansas to Montgomery's home.
Roughly noon, Don Fritz and myself were walking into her house and looked to the right, and there's our baby, and her holding our baby.
They rescued the child, and eventually Montgomery was found guilty in 2007 and executed in January 2021. But that case and Strong's interaction with Montgomery still vivid.
When I was sitting in the car talking to her one-on-one, I'm looking at her hand, and she has a fresh Band-Aid on it that has bled through. But I can see her fingernails and her cuticles, and she's got blood and dried tissue in her hands, in her fingernails and her cuticles. I could smell, it was body sweat and stale cigarette smoke. And then to look down and see her hands, and I thought, and it was just, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sitting in a car with a monster.
The silver lining of that case, Strong and a few others actually met with Victoria Jo Stinnett, the baby they saved 20 years ago now when she graduated high school.
What did that one mean to you guys?
That was very emotional.
Moments like that is what makes it all worth it for people like Strong. They want to give families peace after unimaginable loss, but they also carry a lot of the weight from the cases and the families they interact with too.
Managing the trauma that I saw within myself, that vicarious trauma, I was not good at it. I mean, let's be frank. That was very troubling to me. We didn't have the coping skills that are afforded our law enforcement and first responders today.
That's something Strong is proud of, though. Law enforcement and first responders improving when it comes to mental health.
Whoever started that program is to be commended, but we didn't deal with that well back in the day. A lot of bad coping skills came to surface.
And with just a few days left until retirement, Strong sits here hoping people know that he dedicated a lot of his life to helping others, and he believes the sheriff's office is in great hands moving forward.
What are you going to miss the most?
Without a doubt, the camaraderie, and the stories.
Chris Roush, KQ2 News.